Hi, I'm Rob Penzak, a physician-turned-writer and the creator of YourGods.com.
And I'm Rick Wingrove, Capital Area Director for American Atheists, and welcome to Road to Reason. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, so like us or get our number off the website, give us a call, leave a message, and maybe we'll talk about it on the air.
All right. Now, I know there's a couple of week lag period between the different shows, so this isn't going to get right out to our viewers. But Rick, this past week you were out in Austin, Texas for the 50th Annual American Atheist Convention. I thought it'd be nice for our viewers, whether they're religious, atheist, or secularist, just to hear what you went over while you were out there, what the meeting was all about. Was it just a bunch of atheists getting together to make fun of God, or did you have some agenda that people were trying to get done?
Both. There's that. Actually, this is American Atheist's 50th year in operation, in existence. And it started in 1963 after a landmark Supreme Court decision called Murray versus Curlett, which is what removed school prayer, or prayer from public schools. So 50th anniversary convention in the place where it all started, Austin, Texas, which is ironically where Madalyn O'Hair set up shop. So it was just a huge group of speakers and atheists. There were about 1,000 atheists present, and just a big list of speakers. And a little fun was made, a lot of fun was had. Mm-hmm. And Austin's a great town. If you ever have to move to Texas, gun to your head, Austin's the only place to go.
And what are the prime reason that this was founded? Are there a couple of main tenets that American Atheist is about?
There are. The main tenets are separation of church and state, first and foremost. But also, we're concerned with the advancement of science, especially in light of the determined effort by the Discovery Institute and others to demonize science and scientists. And then there's the protection of the civil rights of atheists. And the fourth thing that we're kind of focused on is normalization. And if we're not doing anything else, we're certainly doing that. We're part of the conversation. Frequently we have a seat at the table, and you don't get hunted with dogs so much in the U.S. anymore. So we're having an effect.
Yeah, I think that one of the big hopes is as you get out there talking about humanitarian things and women's rights and gay rights and voting rights for everybody, even if they don't apply directly to you, you're really just trying to be a positive force for our whole culture. At some point, hopefully that's going to kick in where people won't buy into it when people on the far Christian right try to paint atheists in a really nasty way. Hopefully they'll start to remember, I actually saw that guy speak at this, and he was just saying everybody should have the right to vote, and we need to protect other people's rights to vote.
Right. Part of the implied message is that we're just normal. We're here, we're normal, get used to it, you could say. And we're not like the preachers have said we are for 2,000 years. We're normal, we're your neighbors. We're just anything you are, any job that there is out there, we have it. We're part of America.
Yeah, I heard William Lane Craig had a very dismissive comment about the convention being nothing but posturing, saying that atheism's intellectual arguments haven't gone anywhere, they don't hold up. And I wasn't quite sure why he wanted to inject himself into that conversation to say, yeah, you've been here for 50 years, and so what? And I don't know if that's if he's aware that apologetics is really just a big cover-up, so he's trying to heap some nastiness at atheism. I'm not sure why he threw himself into that part of the conversation.
He was pressed for a comment, and he had to say something, and naturally it had to be dismissive. So it's nothing more than that.
Yeah. All right. Now, I understand that you were chosen as the Regional Director of the Year. Congratulations on that for American Atheists. Should we expect to see you flying first class from now, driving in a new car? And how does that tie into some things that Edwina Rogers, the lobbyist for SCA, one of the things she points out is that the religious right outspends the secular coalition, where they spent $480 million roughly for the religious right, and the secular coalition spent $380,000.
Yeah,
so,
our budget's 1% of theirs.
No, you're right, it's a tenth of a percent.
A tenth of a percent,
yeah,
okay. Yeah, valid point. Whatever we're up against big money. They're well funded, they're serious, they're not going away. But in spite of all that, we are having an impact, we're making a difference. And that's part of what I call normalization. When people realize we're just normal people, that has some influence.
And can we stick on the money a little bit more, since, again, I know Elizabeth and I have talked about alternative medicine, and one of the points we try to hammer home is that this isn't some diddly little thing that if somebody wants to buy this, fine, let them buy their crazy medicine that doesn't work. It's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. And here we have the religious right spending $400 million, and they're not taxed. So if they really, as a bloc, support one of the parties, it's not legal, and it makes a big difference. And I know you've sort of been involved in some of that. So can you talk about why are they not taxed? Is that legal? Should it be?
Well, the American Atheists actually filed a suit recently against the IRS because of privileges granted to religious organizations, 501c3s, that are not available to other organizations or other 501c3s. They get their 501c3 status is awarded automatically, and there are things that they just don't have to report. Everybody else does. So there's that. Also, just their participation in politics is suspect. They're not supposed to be partisan, but they are nakedly partisan. 8 years ago, I filed a formal complaint against Jerry Falwell and his church to the IRS. I supplied them his sermons, his actual sermons. And in 8 years, nothing happened on that. So it's kind of a problem that the IRS itself has no stomach for enforcement of these things. So
yeah, it seems
what good's a law if nobody's going to enforce it?
Right, it's a very systemic problem, and it's hard for the individual citizen to do something other than call upon the government to do what it's supposed to be doing, to do what its own laws says it has to do. There was a quote from Matt Barber, who's the vice president of a right-wing Liberty Council Action, where he really spells out that the IRS has given up going after churches. So his recommendation is just ignore it. If you get a notice from the IRS that they don't want you, you can't get this tax-free money and then preach politics, just ignore it because they're not going to go after you. And again, this is talking about millions and millions of people in church that are hearing these. They did some estimates where they had roughly 8 to 16 million eyeballs were getting this free advertising nakedly, pro-Republican. And sort of everybody knows it. It's out there. You have citizens calling into the IRS saying, please fix this, and yet nothing is being done for it. And it's an ongoing problem.
It's ongoing, and it is partisan, and it is primarily in the direction of the Republicans. Now, in fairness, there are Republican atheists. I don't get it, but there are. So, but their side, most of the major religious organizations that are active politically are right-wing oriented and Republican oriented, if not, hand in hand, in bed with the Republicans. So just saying, not being partisan here.
Yeah. Now there's also, I understand you didn't get to see the talk, but Pete Stark, the lone atheist congressman, I guess was at the convention, and he's now, now he's gone. We had Kristen Sinema from the Arizona House of Representatives. There was some confusion, I guess, as to whether or not she was an atheist, and I don't know if that's simply she doesn't want to embrace the term for political reasons, that is too poisonous.
I think that's exactly, you put your finger on it. She is clearly an atheist, but that term is still radioactive, so a lot of people are not going to use that term. It's still probably a little bit politically expedient not to use that exact phrase.
And I don't know how we get over that hump. Again, you almost need a bunch of people to come out at the same time as atheists and say this is acceptable. This is the humanist agenda that we're trying to push. Atheists aren't bad. We want all these various equal rights and supporting, the regular person. So it's a little frustrating, disappointing. Everybody has their right to stay in the closet in that sense, and I certainly understand the politics of it. But it'd be nice if there was, we'll talk about the clergy project in a little bit. We almost need a political project like that where all the politicians that really are atheists, and there has to be a large percentage because these are really a lot of well-educated people.
Right. Where there's not supposed to be any political test for public office, there is. There still is a tacit religious test for political office. And most people are in Congress, I think, are quite cognizant of that. The thing about it is, we know that Kristen Sinema is an atheist. Pete Stark was the first of the atheists in Congress to be open about it. There was actually another guy, I believe his name was David Honda, also from California, who was an atheist, but he never had the high profile that Pete Stark did. And now the thing is, I suspect there are probably 100 atheists in Congress. It's just we don't know who they are, and they're certainly not going to be out about it because it'll still get them in trouble with their constituents.
Did Pete Stark get bounced out of Congress after a couple years because of his vicious legislation against, Christian America?
Not that I'm aware of. He retired in an orderly fashion just because he's been there for
Right, and it was after like 30
many
or 40
terms.
years that he served.
Yeah.
So again, we somehow have to get over this illusion or delusion that the atheists are out to cause harm.
He was
served,
also from California's 13th district, which is the San Francisco Bay Area, I believe, as was Representative Honda, both of them from there. And they're certainly going to get tested on the religious chops a lot less there than they would in Ohio or somewhere.
All right. Now, another thing that you guys spoke about is the kind of down the rabbit hole jurisprudence where this whole World Trade Center cross was deemed a secular object, and therefore we're going to let it go. Can you talk about that whole?
Right.
case?
Well, American Atheists also filed suit against World Trade Center, I think it's the Lower Manhattan Redevelopment District or something like that, where incidentally Jon Stewart of The Daily Show is on the board of directors, making him a defendant in this case. Be that as it may, while we were at the convention, a decision was handed down by a federal district court, I think that's right, that essentially arriving at the fictional and preposterous definition of this thing as secular. The cross is the obvious icon of Christianity. It's the most identifiable icon of the biggest religion on the planet. This whole cross adventure that was going on there at the World Trade Center site was perpetrated by the Catholic Diocese of New York. So you've got this icon of Christianity being pushed very hard by the Archdiocese, and they declare it a secular thing. They just create this fiction out of thin air, which could not be further from the truth. And this is what the judge came up with, and that's it.
And one of the disheartening things about this, I think that this particular judge, I like to dump on the Republicans a lot because I think they've done so much harm, but this was a judge, I think she's in the gay community. I think she was appointed by Bill Clinton. I don't know how her politics, but assumedly it's somewhat more progressive. And her statement was, no reasonable observer would view the artifact that it's endorsing Christianity because the cross is being accompanied by placards explaining its meaning and surrounded by secular artifacts. And yeah, it was just such a stretch. Like who are you trying to convince that this cross that was taken out of there because it's a cross, right? There were, these are all the cross beams that are made. And so out of those thousands of items that they found, there's one item that the atheists are complaining about. It's the one that looks like a cross. There was one item that was taken out to be displayed because it was a cross. And so then to jump to the conclusion that, well, yeah, it looks like a cross, but it's secular and it gave inspiration to everybody. Did it inspire the atheists that were helping save people, or the Muslims maybe that were helping save people? Is this in memory of the atheists that died, the Muslims that died, the Hindus that died? Right? This is, like you said, it's very focused. It was done for a very specific reason. And then to pretend that it doesn't have the religious connotations, which is the only reason they want it, is just absurd.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally absurd. What's interesting, too, is that there were 200 of those on every floor of the World Trade Center. What's amazing is that there were so few that survived in nominally cross-like form. So,
right, yeah, the statistic, right. If everything starts like this, just depends where it breaks. Everyone has a chance to be a cross.
Everything on every floor.
And then I'm not sure what comfort would be derived from the fact that if this was a holy relic, that God chose to save a piece of molten metal instead of the 3,000 human beings that were there. Like, what are they getting from this? How is this a wonderful, inspiring thing?
Right, it's kind of odd that would be taken as a sign from God when, the thousands of people had died there, and here's a sign of God's hand at work. Please explain that to me if you can.
Yeah. And so do you know this? I saw some David Silverman comments. They're going to appeal this. Any thoughts about how it's going to go forward, or we just have to bring it to the next level and see what happens?
We'll appeal it because it's such an obvious fiction that they've created. And not the first case that's relied on that either. But we will proceed. There
was a similar case, I thought, or not similar to this, but with American Atheists out, I think in Utah, with all the crosses being put up for fallen police officers.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, and so what was the decision in that case?
The decision was we won. That was determined that was a clear, obvious symbol of Christianity, of one religion, put up there for religious reasons.
Right, and this was what a lot of police officers that were probably Mormons that didn't particularly use the cross as their
there was that
necessarily.
Yeah, it wasn't even the majority religion in the state. So,
right. So I think the two-facedness to pretend that this isn't what it clearly is I'm not sure how you let that slide, because I guess there's some frustration in the atheist community whether or not you should pursue this, and is it important?
We're gonna pursue it because it's so obviously false with this fiction they've created. So it has to be addressed, and American Atheists will appeal.
And then I think you can also see, just with all the laws that are getting passed right now, that it really does matter if you have, a theocracy or a underlying theocracy, the kinds of agendas that get pushed. It really makes a difference. So if you just sort of keep letting things slide, you'll get, all this anti-female legislation right now.
This is what they get for their $400 million a year, are these constant lawsuits. I mean, we're so outspent, that we can't begin to keep up with everything that they're doing. So American Atheists, for their part, has to spend their money judiciously and decide which cases are going to, which can succeed, which will succeed, and what's the ultimate outcome of those victories. So that's how we try to spend our money. But it's just impossible to keep up with the amount of money being thrown at us.
Yeah, there's one other kind of little piece of hypocrisy that I noted when reading about this, was that the groups that are trying to say this is going to be good for all the culture, this is going to represent everybody in America, they weren't so open to this when the mosque was being considered for ground zero.
Exactly.
And it's, so if Islam clearly had no place there, why does Christianity get a 17-foot cross there and, not acknowledge it?
And vouchers is a place where some schools are having to come to terms with the fact that tax money, if it can be spent on Christianity, can be spent on Islam. And this seems to be a rude awakening for a lot of people. And naturally, there's pushback on that. They didn't know it was going to go to Muslim schools, too.
Yeah, since you bring up schools, maybe we can talk about the Good News Club.
The Good News Club.
That came up at the convention, I understand?
It did. We had a speaker there whose name...
Like Catherine Stewart?
Catherine Stewart, thank you. Catherine Stewart was there. She's done the research. She wrote a book about the Good News Club, which is, frankly, this was based on a Supreme Court decision which said if you were going to let clubs in, you got to let any club in. You can't decide based on the content. So this is basically turned into a backdoor for straight up, hardcore, well-funded, direct Christian proselytization on the school grounds. It's back in.
And to young kids, I understand.
To young kids, the most impressionable. And we're back with the same thing. Just to opt out of it stigmatizes you. So it's voluntary in the sense that religion is ever voluntary. So it is in thousands of schools already, and there's nothing to stop it. It can be in every school, and the people who are doing it are determined that it be in every school.
Yeah, from the parts I read, it's really being done on the sly. One of their pictures has 5 multicolored balloons that are all flavorful and fun, and they talk about their parties and their games and their this and their that.
It's all fun.
Right, so the parents, they hear somewhere in there it's a Christian whatever, but they don't get that they're going in there to hammer into the 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, this aggressive proselytizing.
This is not a group of people of common interest come together. This is an outside group, a national group, who is setting these up under just the ruse of a club. It is determined, well-funded proselytization in our public schools. It's in, and I don't know how it gets dislodged. But we need to pay attention to this, and people need to be on the case about this, because it's not a club.
Right, and also I think even for a lot of Christians out there, this is a very fundamentalist club. This is not a very low-key mentioning God, but just having, a good social time together. This is a very specific agenda to drive home that evangelical point, and it's not sold that way. It's not marketed that way, and it's not, a little 6-year-old kid isn't going to be able to separate, okay, this is being done at my school. I guess it's just part of the regular learning. They're not going to know, oh, this is that evangelical organization that sends out to proselytize to little kids.
Yeah, it's okay with the school. It must be okay, and it, and it is evangelism. It's not comparative religion. It's not. There's no real eye on science here. It's biblical literalism and evangelism, and it's hardcore.
Right. That's I think would be a great counter to start teaching comparative religion to school as soon as kids are able to get that. And I think you'll have a very different society if you see, oh, there's a lot of similarities between the ancient Egyptian myths and the Greek myths, and being born from a virgin happened to 30 different heroes. It's going to demystify a lot of that, and I think it's no accident that comparative religion isn't available maybe to college as an elective.
Right. You know, and the people that are pushing this, they're fine with this being this school, and other people you talk to about it are just fine with this. They don't see any problem with the crossover. My question is, how about if we have the government let us into the churches on Sundays to teach science and evolution? I wonder if they'd be open to that.
What's funny is I bet that a lot of the people in the pews might have an appetite for that, but I bet all the people running the show
The
would
people
make
running
sure
the
that doesn't
show,
happen.
right? The people who tell the people in the pews what to think.
Exactly. We had an interesting talk before the show about we can't be too focused on America alone, that evangelizing is starting to see other markets amongst the downtrodden and the less educated. You guys were talking about
Africa.
Right, in Africa. And,
Well, since I was a kid, the Christians have been proselytizing Africa really hard. Nigeria, even when I was a kid, they were in those churches and trying really, really, really hard, just focusing on them. And you see what's happened in those countries, not just Nigeria, but Kenya also is a very Christian country. And they want to kill the gays. They don't know what they got in mind for atheists, but yeah, none
I
of
guess
it's
that's
good.
the morality being shipped overseas.
That brand of morality is such a perversion of morality.
It's also no accident that this is being sent to places that are less educated. A couple of quotes recently was Pat
Robertson, the miracles.
Right, where if you go to an Ivy League school, then you're not going to get miracles. You need to be simple to get the miracles.
Yeah, pointing out that these people didn't go to Ivy League colleges. Did he just call a whole continent of people stupid?
Yeah, well, and if he didn't, Rick Santorum was happy to do the same, and anybody that wants to go to college are snobs, and curse Obama for wanting to open up education and make it affordable.
Well, before here, we've tried to alert people to the anti-intellectualism that is going on in the Christian church, but which is also the very embodiment of anti-intellectualism is the fight against evolution, against science in general, where they demonize science, they demonize scientists. It's Orwellian anti-intellectualism, and it's frightening. It needs to be addressed.
Right, and it's nothing new. It goes back century after century. It's always been like that, and we really do need to look to the past a little bit.
Well, if
look
smart
at our
people,
history and,
if smart people are demons, the only thing to do is burn them.
Right, apparently so.
So.
What else? Let's also talk about the clergy project, to go to the opposite end instead of the schools. What about when you have adults who've actually been in the ministry their whole lives and now are trying to break away? You guys talked about that project there?
Yeah, that was talked about, and I think I said before on here that last year's American Atheist Convention, the clergy project was the most dramatic thing I saw there. I usually go to hear people talk about science, but the clergy project, I went in and watched and saw a woman preacher from Florida named Teresa McBain, who, by the way, we've got an excellent interview of her, which we hope to have on here in a couple of weeks. But Teresa McBain was a preacher, and a working preacher in Orlando, Florida, who came out at last year's convention, ended her career that day. Fortunately, she went to work for American Atheists almost immediately, because the clergy project is kind of trying to be a soft landing for the increasing number of preachers who are in this situation and who are working in the pulpit, but they have slowly come to the dawning realization that they're atheists. And the position this puts them in, they're basically top of the local social heap. Their wife is the first lady socially, locally. And here all of a sudden they're an atheist. And what do? They probably don't know how to do anything else. So they've got a problem. And Clergy Project is a soft landing, and it gives me hope for humanity.
Also, they can be excellent spokesmen, because hopefully, and several of them from what I've heard, it's, as you read more and more about the Bible and you let yourself think about it, nothing can be quicker to drive you away from religion than to read some of the barbaric things that are in there. And then if you're listening to what you're telling these kids, or just your adult audience too, to believe in, once you start to think about it, it's a hard thing to do.
Well, we say it kind of like a joke sometimes in the atheist community. Read your Bible, because Bible creates atheists. If you got in there and read it verse for verse and paid attention to what you were reading, yeah, there's some pretty crazy stuff in there.
Now, let's move on to Dave Silverman. You said he went over some statistics that were kind of showing how atheism is gaining a foothold despite the huge financial disadvantage you're at, despite the fact that a lot of people still see it as a really nasty word and turn aside from it really quickly.
Right. Well, I didn't create any graphics. I wish I had, but he presented some Google search statistics. showing interest in atheism going back through 2009, I think it was. And he pointed out that the number of hits, the interest in atheism, spiked in around December of 2009. And then there was a level below it, never went below again. There was a new floor level for interest in atheism. 2010, another spike in December, a new floor level below which Google hits have not gone below.
Does this break it down by age by any chance? Like, does it show if young people are driving this?
I didn't see any of that, but the point of it all was that atheism has taken a spike every December for the last 4 years because of the billboards that American Atheists have been putting up. It makes some people really angry, and all of a sudden Fox News is talking about it, and MSNBC is talking about it, but mostly Fox News. And it has caused a dramatic increase in atheism, a new floor every year. So, and this is all good.
Yeah, I think that we really stand to gain. Anytime somebody looks into atheism for whatever reason, if they have any open mind at all, they're going to start to see the facts, and the facts are very one-sided. And even whether you're looking at the biblical literalism or if you're just looking at the humanitarian way that most of the atheist community leans.
Plus the sheer numbers of atheists below the age of 30, the nuns. And where it's 20% at our age group, it's like 30% or higher. It's almost a third, or it is a third of everybody. Again, this is a good sign for mankind in that we're abandoning religion, the old Bronze Age superstitions, faster than ever, and frankly catching up with Europe on this.
Still ways to go on that.
They've dropped a lot of it. We got a couple of minutes left, or a minute left. Mm-hmm. Just want to say quickly, Ken Cuccinelli, what's up with that guy? He wants to recriminalize sodomy in this state. And
makes you want to live in Virginia?
Yeah, makes you want to live in Virginia. Recriminalization of something. And all I can say is a lot of people going to prison.
Right, and people better look up what sodomy is. Like if you're, I guess, non-missionary sex, you're getting,
yeah.
I'm not sure what we're allowed to say on the show, actually, but a lot of regular, folks who aren't in the gay community are not going to be thrilled with this, completely separately from maybe you shouldn't be so anti-gay even if you're not gay. I'm not sure who it's harming. We're going to have Jamila Bey on in a couple of weeks.
Jamila Bey in 2 weeks will be on, and more things coming. At some point, we're going to take this thing live and do call-in.
Great. All right, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.